Newsflash. We don't want an internationalist country. We don't want world banks, globalization of our economy, a country with no border and no identity. You are not allowed to change the identity of this country. Americans want a nation state. Our country, with a history of freedom, is combined with a history of responsibility. And yet our proud history, even our money, is being rewritten to accommodate a new worldview. We are so beaten down by political correctness that most of us are numb to the surrender of America. And as for those naysayers, the one who say, Donald Trump just can't win, listen up. Those naysayers in England got it all wrong, didn't they? Prime Minister Cameron got it all wrong. You know, the one who criticized Donald Trump for his temporary ban on Muslims. And now Cameron's out. Obama, too, got it all wrong, jetting to England as if he were the world's dictator, telling the Brits what's good for them. And while we're at it, Hillary Clinton got it all wrong on just about everything except her bank account. When the President of the United States, a country founded on the Judeo-Christian ethics, tells Christians at a prayer breakfast, no less, to get off their high horse after Christians get their heads cut off, not even willing to mention Islamic extremism, when the President of the United States allows hordes of immigrants whose names, let alone backgrounds, we don't even know, while ISIS proudly announces that they're infiltrating these refugees, when states are not even notified who the federal government is sending to live in their neighborhoods, flying in unknowns from Central America and the Middle East en masse, and they demand Sharia law in place of American law, then we are in the wilderness, folks. And I don't want to hear that Americans need to be more humble, that we need more humility, that my free speech needs to be tamped down so as not to offend another's religion. Nowhere does our Constitution say we cannot say something about another's religion. Nowhere does our Constitution say we cannot say anything that offends others. And by the way, where does it say I can't have a gun? Do not use our Constitution against us while you use the same Constitution to shield those who violate our laws, showering them with all the rights and benefits, but none of the responsibilities. When our president's first response to an American getting his head cut off is to show up in a golf cart and then keep on golfing, when he is and his attorney general's response to Americans being killed by Muslim terrorists is to stand up for Muslims, then it's time to take our country back. And don't tell me that to not take these people in is not who we are. I know who we are. My grandfather was a part of the greatest generation that stormed that beach in Normandy. My dad saw the plume in Nagasaki and later died early because of it. No, you don't preach to me. I know who we are, and I know who I am. I am an unapologetic nationalist. I am an unapologetic American. And that Statue of Liberty that says, give me your tired and your poor and your huddled masses, we never had a problem taking them in from the beginning. We're the most generous country in the world. As a judge, I've sworn in newly naturalized citizens for years and have never been more proud of immigrants and America. But they do it legally. They have to swear allegiance to America, follow our laws, and they cannot be exempt from arrest because of their illegal status, as they now are in sanctuary cities. Even the Supreme Court had to stop the president who attempted to ban the deportation of 4 million illegals and give them an automatic right to work here. Folks, when a man running for president proudly carries with him the sword of socialism, and when a woman running for president accepts money from countries that kill gays and stone women to death for her family's so-called charity, when their holdings are invested in the Cayman Islands and her husband is middleman to some of the world's biggest deals as they feather their nest at the expense of America, it is time to take the country back. So no, I don't believe in globalization. I don't believe in this internationalist mumbo-jumbo hogwash. I don't believe in self-denigration. I believe in our nation state. I believe in our borders. And I believe in the law, the Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence that outlines the character of the people and who we are. Every week, I speak to you in front of a backdrop. But it's so much more than that. It's the American flag. It represents the spilled blood and treasure of those who gave up everything for this great nation. It stands for freedom, equality, and justice. And I'm damn proud of it. And that's my open. Tell me what you think on my Facebook page or Twitter, hashtag Judge Jeanine. And joining me now is the co-host of The Five, Juan Williams. Good evening, Juan. Nice to have you on the show tonight. How are you?
I'm great. The weather is great. Good evening, Judge Jeanine. Your opening statement was strong.
Yes. All right, let's talk about Brexit. I appreciate that. So I won't let you hit me right off the bat, Juan.
No.
What do you think is happening with Brexit, Juan, and the fact that, you know, the Brits decided to exit the EU? What was that about?
Well, I think there are a number of things to say here. One is I think you have a lot of people reacting to the immigration issue that we know is very high on their agenda. And secondly, the impact of the loss of so many jobs, especially in Britain. You've had a terrific, recession. They got hit much harder than we got hit here in the United States. Their unemployment is much higher. So I think you have those factors playing. But to pick up on what you said in your opening statement, anybody in this country who thinks, well, gee, we're so different, they might be whistling past the graveyard, Judge Jeanine, because you look at the polls over there, the polls were wrong. You look at the anti-establishment fervor over there. I see a lot of it over here. And when you stop and think about, even their history. Remember, Margaret Thatcher won and brought conservatism to Great Britain. The next year, it was Ronald Reagan right here in the United States. But where I think you're off a bit is our electorate is much different. Over there, they don't have the diversity. The working class there is almost all white, while the working class here has lots of Latinos
Juan,
and
that's
black
a great
people.
point. That's a great point. We are more diverse, but it was about London, almost the urban, more cosmopolitan versus the other areas. But London and the Brits have a big immigration issue too, so they're not as homogenous as they once were. But isn't there a worldwide reaction to this immigration thing, this lunacy of, no borders anymore? And I know you're not a Trump fan, and I am a Trump fan. But, he has hit a chord that I don't believe Hillary Clinton can ever hit.
No, but remember two things. One is, for Britain and for the European Union, they have endless borders, and they were being controlled by the European Union in Brussels in terms of immigration flows and entry. Here in the United States, we are blessed to have two large oceans, and we have two neighbors, Canada and Mexico. That's about it. You talk about Syrian refugees and fears that they're being infiltrated by terrorists. Germany's taken in millions. We've taken in less than 10,000. I don't even think 2,000 at this juncture.
I think now they're not talking about 500% more. But look, Juan, you admit that we're flying them in. We are flying them into states around the country and not giving those states notice. I mean, there is a war going on between some of the in Congress who have no say with any of these refugee programs or bringing them in. We don't know who they are.
Well, of course we know who they are. They have to go through a strict screening. And let's take the Syrian refugees, for example. It's 2 years, Judge Janine, before they can come anywhere near these shores. So we do know who's coming. But I think, to your point, you look at what happened down in Orlando or San Bernardino. Those people were born in the United States. What we don't know, what we can't control is the kind of poisonous ideology.
Because I'm coming up against a break, Juan. Here's the thing. The head of the FBI said if we've got no database to match them to, and if they're good and they say I'm not a terrorist, we let them in. Let's stop kidding each other. I mean, there is this naivete that we have, Juan.
No.
Look,
you screen people, you go back, you talk to neighbors, you look at their work histories, you look at their educational.
You're going to go back to Syria? You're going to call Assad and say, hey, did they kill anybody lately? Come on, Juan. It's good to have you on the show, Juan. Thank you.
My pleasure, Judge. Good to be with you.
Another bad week for Hillary Clinton as we learned that the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee failed to hand over a key email to the State Department. Ain't that shocking? With me now is American Center for Law and Justice Chief Counsel, my friend Jay Sekulow. Hey, Jay, how are you?
Hey, Judge. How are you?
So
good.
Everybody's fed up with the email thing, but every week there's something coming in that contradicts something else that she said. Tell us about the significance of the particular email that was the bad news for Hillary this week.
Well, and this was because the narrative that Secretary Clinton has given since the beginning of this scandal when it first erupted was that she never received emails that were marked classified. They may have been marked classified after the fact, she said, but she had no knowledge of that. Well, it turns out, of course, that there were emails received that were marked, in fact, classified. So what has happened is the narrative that she started from the outset has been consistently proved to be incorrect. And again, you know, Judge, you and I talked about this the other day. And the fact is, the Inspector General's report is the indictment. If there was going to be an indictment, it would be the Inspector General's report, which really destroys the entire narrative, including the narrative that she relied on legal counsel from the State Department, their lawyers. She did not. The lawyers said they didn't know anything about this until it was in the media. So that, I think it's showing the depth of the inconsistencies. But the problem, of course, is will the FBI make the recommendation, but then will the
and you know my thoughts on that because she emailed the president on this unsecure server, classified information. The president is complicit. Her first witness is, for the defense, is Barack Obama. We would have a constitutional crisis. There's no way they're going to indict her for that. I think it's the foundation they can get her on. But let me ask you about this. You know, she is so secret. If the FBI can show through its forensic analysis of the deleted emails that what was deleted is the connection between her doing favors for China and Russia and Uzbekistan and Saudi Arabia, while at the same time they were given money, then an indictment should be forthcoming.
Well, this is the, of course, this is the aspect you know as a judge and I know as a lawyer, litigator. The fact is the FBI goes where the evidence leads. And here in this particular situation, you've got the unusual situation where a Secretary of State and at the same time her husband and their family have the foundation. And the foundation apparently has been receiving gifts from a variety of governments, many of which have horrible records on human rights issues. But if, in fact, there was a quid pro quo, and the Supreme Court's going to decide a big quid pro quo case tomorrow, probably Monday, the fact is that could be the real
Jay, here's the bottom line. People don't care that she talks out of both sides of her mouth that she's in favor of women while she's got, the team that trashes all the women that her husband fooled around with and did worse. But what they do care about is the pay for play. If they were making money at the expense of Americans and our interest, if Russia has 20% of our uranium because Bill Clinton, as a middleman, was able to cut a deal with Canada and Uzbekistan, where a guy over there was actually indicted for the deal himself, then, then I think shame on them if they don't do it. But what about Democrats? I mean, they got to be smarter than this. She won't hand over her Wall Street speeches. Now we find out she met with Steve Schwarzman, Blackstone, and the CEO of all these major companies and banks, world banks, and dropped that information and left it off her calendar.
And I think here's what you've got, and you said this in your opening statement. The fact is that whole approach that the DNC is utilizing right now was thoroughly rejected in the United Kingdom as they pulled out of the EU. That same sentiment's here. The question will be, of course, politically, can Donald Trump take that sentiment and turn it into votes at the ballot box? But I think the vulnerability, clearly, on the issues, when you look at and you talk about immigration, and I'm the grandson of an immigrant, so my grandfather came in through Ellis Island. Exactly. But this sentiment's there. So I think there's vulnerability here. The question will be, will the American people take a look at the situation and say, you know what, this is our country, we're gonna take it back? And I think that's the real question of the day for the electorate.
And the fact that as a result of the Supreme Court decision, Obama can no longer ban the deportation of 4 million illegals and give them jobs because he feels like it. It's going to be a different world.
Yeah.
Jay Sekulow,
he said he had a pen and a phone. He ran out of a battery, and he's out of ink. That's what the Supreme Court said.
Thanks for being with us tonight, Jay.
Thanks, Judge.
All right. And one of Donald Trump's top economic advisors is here to talk with me about the Brexit vote and how the campaign can capitalize on it. My interview with him is next. And then Sheriff David Clarke joins me live to talk about this week's Brexit vote lead to change in the United States come November. Let's ask Heritage Foundation economist and Donald Trump economic advisor Steve Moore. Steve, what's your take on the last 72 hours in Brexit? Some people think it's just about the economy. Is it?
Hi, Judge. Great to be with you. Well, it's partly about the economy, no question about it. In England, in Europe, and here in the United States, the middle class, the working class, is in a kind of revolt right now. They're not feeling that we've ever really come out of this recession. Their paychecks are shrinking. That's certainly happening here in the United States. And there is this kind of rebellion that's going on. We saw this in the rise of Donald Trump, and I think that was part of the explanation for what happened in that. Remember, nobody expected that vote that we had.
Well, all the predictions were that it wasn't going to happen. You know what, Steve? You know what I think is interesting? When I started reading about this more, I think like a lot of people, it's happening in Britain. What's that got to do with us? But at the same time, what I find fascinating is that Cameron had Obama go over there and say, in his dictatorial, you shouldn't leave. But what they started saying is that if they exited the EU, that it would harm the national security, that Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of the Islamic State, was probably in favor of Britain leaving the EU. They were so desperate to not leave it. What was that about?
Well, it was over the top. The rhetoric was completely over the top. By the way, it was over the top in Europe, it was over the top in the UK, and it was over the top here in the United States with the president saying you're going to go to the end of the line and it's going to be Armageddon. And you know what happened, I think, Judge, is that people, not just in the United States, but in Britain, I think in Europe as well, they're tuning on to do.
Do you think other countries in Europe are going to follow this?
I do. I think you're going to see. Well, that's a good question.
Greece?
The question is what happens to Germany, because Germany's paying all the bills over there, right? And so there's real anger there.
Angela Merkel, she invited him in. Let her pay the bill.
Exactly. But you said Greece. Greece will never leave the EU because they're the ones who are collecting all the money. So they want it.
But
one of the things that upset the British citizens is their net payers. They have to spend I learned this from Fox News, $10 to $20 billion a year from the British taxpayers go over to Europe, and people said, I'm sick of that. And I think you're seeing the same thing here in the United States. Remember where Donald Trump says, why are we paying all the costs for NATO? Why isn't Europe paying for their own defense?
I never realized it, but apparently they're only paying 4% or something absurd. The other NATO members were paying like 96% of that. That's bizarre. But this scaremongering, and it isn't really about big business, big banks, the establishment, being able to continue to pull the strings on the working man.
No question about it. Yeah, this was a workers' class revolt, and I loved did you see the headline in the New York Post this morning, Judge? Power to the people.
Yeah, I had it in my open, Steve.
I know. Well, it was fantastic. And I think, we're seeing the same dynamics happening here, where I saw it in the Republican primaries, where a lot of the Republican voters, they just didn't believe what these professional politicians were saying. They've been lied to. They think Washington is corrupt. By the way, I'll just give you one amazing statistic. 3 of the 5 wealthiest counties in America are in Washington, D.C. Now, how did that that happen, Judge? We don't produce anything in Washington. All we do is have lawyers and politicians, and yet we get all the money.
All right, Steve Moore, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
See you soon.
All right. Street Justice takes on the congressional sit-in, and that's ahead. But next, the historic vote in England and the new details in the Clinton investigation. I'm talking about all of it and the impact of the race for president with my political pen. This very busy news night. Trump, Hillary, Brexit. So much to talk about. Let's get right to it with my all-star political panel, American Conservative Union Chairman Matt Schlapp and former senior aide to Democratic Senator Charles Schumer, Chris Hahn. Chris, where are you?
I am in West Babylon, New York, out on Long Island.
Oh, all right. Well, you're in the Hamptons. All right, Matt, Brexit, who does it benefit, Trump or Clinton?
Trump, absolutely. You know what Hillary Clinton's campaign slogan is? Stronger together. What was the slogan of those who wanted to stay in the EU? Stronger together. There are so many themes that parallel what's happening in the UK and what's happening here. It's really interesting.
Well, yeah, it is interesting, Chris, and I don't think you can deny that this is something that doesn't benefit Hillary. You know what? The fact that she couldn't figure out a statement for a while tells me they were like in the trenches saying, oh, my goodness. But let's talk about what happened with this sit-in in Congress this week. Okay, so they have this gun control sit-in. What was the point of that? If they couldn't get enough people to get a signature, to get a petition signed for a vote, they couldn't get the amendments passed, they couldn't get in the House or the Senate. What is this, play acting?
I thought it was exciting politics for a couple of hours. I think America really woke up to see that there's no action happening in Congress on a very serious issue.
And whose fault is that?
I mean, all politics, Judge, is theater.
Okay, but whose fault is it? Is it the Republicans' fault?
I think that Speaker Ryan should let this come to a vote. If he really wants to see it happen, he should let it.
You know what? If they can't follow the system and the process to get a bill to on the floor, then it's their fault. It's a bipartisan failure. And you know what cracks me up, Chris? I just got to tell you this. Obama had the House and the Senate in 2009 and the White House, and today he's like, the Republicans are stopping us from doing this. What do you say, Matt?
Hey, I think he wasted an opportunity then.
What did you say, Chris?
Sorry, Matt. I think he wasted an opportunity on guns back then.
Yeah, we know he wasted. I thought you were going to defend him. Go ahead, Matt.
Guns. He didn't pass anything on immigration, shockingly enough. You know what this was, Judge? This was a sit-a-buster. It was people sitting around doing nothing.
Well, they do nothing anyway.
Do you know why they ended the sit-a-buster? They ended the sit-a-buster because they wanted to catch airplane flights to get out of town, and many of them wanted to go to the congressional baseball game. It was shenanigans and just a ploy from the beginning, and it's why Americans really hate Congress.
They do. I got to tell you, walk the street. Wait till you see Street Justice. They hate them. All right, what about the Supreme Court this week, Chris? Bad week for the Dems again. Supreme Court decision, a 4-4 split, keeps the Fifth Circuit decision in place. The president is trying to block the deportation of 4 million illegal immigrants and give them a license to work. And they said, no way, Jose.
Well, you know, bad for the president today, good for Hillary in November. If you're a Latino voter in America right now, you know exactly who's on your side and who you should be voting for.
But you know what? I got to tell you.
If Donald Trump doesn't get over 35% of Latinos,
well,
he ain't getting
if they're
elected.
illegal, how are they going to vote?
Well, no, you know, that's the thing. Legal Latinos in this country feel very strongly about this because they know how hard the process was.
The legal Latinos who came the right way, who got a lawyer, who swore allegiance in this country, who know our history, who want to speak our language, they're angry that they had to pay those lawyers.
He's underwater in Florida, and it's because of the Latino vote. He's doing very well among white males.
Okay, Chris. Here's the deal. What happened in Brexit had a lot to do with immigration.
Sure,
the fact is this, which is we talk about nationalism. I just like to talk about sovereignty. Whatever happened to the idea that a country controls its borders and who enters this country?
Matt,
we are a nation of people who used to be immigrants,
Let him finish,
but we get to control when the immigrant gets to become a legal resident and a citizen. Guess what, Chris? That's not racist. And guess what else? Americans are responding to that message.
Go ahead, Chris.
Most Americans, Matt, including Donald Trump, didn't even know what Brexit was 2 weeks ago.
They
and
know
I got to
now.
tell you something.
They know now,
the
Chris.
The Latino voters and educated whites in America are not going to stand for that kind of isolationism that they had there in Britain. In fact, most British people today are regretting what happened last week.
That's
really?
untrue.
Did you do
No,
your
that's
own poll,
untrue.
Chris? Stop with the hogwash, Chris. Most
that's
Brits
hogwash.
are regretting the decision they made 48 hours ago? Are you
No,
kidding?
Well, at least
No, Judge,
look,
the
there
polls
is
actually show that more Brits are actually regretting the fact that they didn't also vote to pull out of the EU than the opposite. So that's completely untrue. And the fact is this, which
Well,
is
you know,
there's going to be some political turbulence after this pullout. There's no question. And everyone's going to use it for their political advantage. The fact is people
Right.
get the truth here. Countries should be able to control their borders and control their economies. And that's the theme of the day.
Well,
What's wrong
Matt,
with
when the
being an
pound-
American? What's wrong with being proud of this nation? Why are people flying the flags from other countries and burning the American flag? I get the First Amendment, but you know what?
Oh.
They went too far.
First of all, most people do not burn the American flag. Most people,
Well,
there
the
are
people
very
carrying
small,
the flags
small
from the other
minority.
countries are.
Judge, I think most people, immigrants, non-immigrants, even people coming here illegally, want to be part of the American dream. That's
Yeah,
why
well,
they
if
come
they
here.
want
That's
to
why
be
my
part of the
grandfather
American
came
dream,
here.
follow the American law, Chris.
That's right.
Well,
That's right.
look, if the American law was fixed the way it was supposed to be, if we were able
Fixed.
to deal with the
The
market
law
wait,
is in
wait.
place.
Wait.
Your family, my family, Matt's family follow the law.
there was
Judge,
there was a
the
system that
fact
could
is
handle it.
this. Not only do we have people here who shouldn't be here, they're here illegally. You know what the courts just showed and the Supreme Court? The President of the United States is acting in an illegal fashion when he
And
tries
you know
to give
what?
these people
in this
illegal
sanctuary
status.
city, we don't deport them, and they're killing people. Shame on us. Match slap, Chris Hahn. Bye. Street justice is still ahead, and next, some Law and Order with Sheriff David Clarke. We'll talk about the Freddie Gray verdict this week. Don't go away. Found not guilty of all charges. That makes him the third officer in that case tried without a conviction. Meanwhile, there are growing calls for prosecutor Marilyn Mosby to step down and drop the charges against the other officers in this case. Here with reaction, Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke. Good evening, Sheriff. All right, the Freddie Gray case and what happened in Baltimore is pretty much a symbol of the black community's distrust of law enforcement. And yet here we had a black prosecutor, a black victim, a black defendant, and a black judge. Is this a racist verdict?
Not even hardly. Judge, look, this woman, Marilyn Mosby, is drowning in her own incompetency. Justice has prevailed for one of Baltimore's finest yet again. Look, you're a former prosecutor, a district attorney. You never would have charged this case. You were a judge. You sat and heard these types of cases. You would have dismissed this too. Keep in mind that Marilyn Mosby, before she became the state's attorney in that county in Baltimore, has never charged or prosecuted a homicide case.
That's right.
She does not know anything that goes into this. I investigated
The woman was an
homicides.
insurance lawyer. Did you know that, David?
Right.
She was an insurance
Yes.
lawyer. And within 24
In over
hours
her
of
head.
getting the autopsy report, she says it's a homicide, we're going to indict. And then she says, I hear your call, as if she's the queen who's going to come out and calm the masses. What's going on in this woman's head?
Well, she weaponized the prosecutor's office there looking for a political end. She went on a witch hunt looking to hang one of Baltimore's finest for something that they did not do. I've investigated a lot of homicides myself. I've taken them in for charging. If you were the prosecutor in this, I would have said, Madam District Attorney, we don't have anything here other than a horrible tragedy. There's no criminal intent on anybody's part, and you would have done the right thing. I think right now, Marilyn Mosby is going to have to dig down and find the moral courage to do the right thing here. She continues to put up this facade, and the good people in the city of Baltimore have to relive and have this wound open and relive this horrible tragedy over and over and over again because of her incompetence. She promised something she cannot deliver. It's time to let the city of Baltimore put this ugly chapter behind her and let them move forward. I'm asking the Attorney General of the state of Maryland to move in, take this case over, go into a court, ask that these charges be dismissed, and end this horrible nightmare.
You know what's interesting, Chief, is Sheriff, I should say, is the fact that when they were put to the test of proving the evidence of this depraved heart murder, they couldn't even prove anything with how many minutes of video they had. The defendant who was in the van, another prisoner, said, nah, everything was fine. And, you know, the guy, there were two minimal infractions, one that involved a wider turn than it should have been, which would have been, according to, you know, the defense, the G-force would have benefited the victim in the case. I mean, does the woman not know how to prove a case?
No, she doesn't, because she should have never charged this case. Look, she made this decision even before the investigation was completed by the Baltimore Police Department. That's why I said she was engaging in political chicanery with the law here. And now she doesn't know what to do. She may become the first prosecutor in U.S. history to have a 6-defendant case and go 0 for 6.
Well, those are pretty bad numbers. But let me ask you this. Look, as a DA, I ran my office. You know, I had a lot of investigators and cops who worked for me. The most important thing that we can do as prosecutors is to work closely with cops. How do you think it's working in that DA's office for the victim of rape, the victim of larceny, a burglary? I mean, when the cops go into the DA's office, I mean, what's it like? This woman is looking to hang these people with no evidence. How does this impact the community?
She's damaged. She has no integrity. This relationship is ruined between her, the community, and the law enforcement officers, Baltimore's finest. That's why I think that she should give up her law license after she pulls out of this. And if not, I think the Maryland Bar Association ought to conduct an investigation and suspend her license. A first-year law student, a first-year person who's in law school would know, Judge, you know this, that they don't have anything to suggest any criminality above the standard needed, especially for a homicide. I've worked homicides. I brought them in for review. It's a very high standard, and most times prosecutors don't take chances with these types of cases.
All right, Sheriff David Clarke, thanks so much for being with us. And lawmakers take a seat in a sit-in on Capitol Hill, so I hit the streets to talk about it in Street Justice. Stay with us. Sit-in over gun control legislation, a sit-in. They stopped working because they were mad that they couldn't get their way. So I hit the streets for some street justice to get your take on the congressional chaos. Take a look. Okay, what do you think of the congressional sit-in when everybody brought their sleeping bags and sat on the floor in Congress because they couldn't get their way?
It's a start.
It's a start? No, it's a stop. It's not a start.
All right, it's a stop. I mean, get something done already.
So you have all these Congress people bringing in their sleeping bags because they can't get a bill passed and they're kicking and screaming. Is it any wonder they're held in such low esteem?
It's not wonder. I mean, that's what they're doing anyways.
So what are they doing?
They're sleeping. They brought their sleeping bags. They're ready to camp out.
Yeah, well, now they're admitting that they're doing nothing but sleeping.
Listen, I just like to see our government get together and be effective. I'm getting tired of watching what goes on.
Yeah, but we're all tired. They're held in such low esteem. 18% approval rating, okay?
Deserve it.
It's all a play to take our guns. Don't believe it. I'm telling you, it's just not right. They're acting like children. But if the Republicans did that, oh my Lord.
What do you think of all these Congress people and the sit-in in Congress because they couldn't get a bill passed? They brought their sleeping bags.
Well, I think sometimes drastic action is necessary to get things done.
Why sit in Congress? Go outside and sit in and let Congress do the people's work.
Well, I think they're sitting in because they want to create action. And that's the place to be. I mean, doing it outside is not going to probably have as great of an effect as doing it inside. Look at the attention you're giving it.
The amazing thing is that they couldn't get a bill passed in the House, the Senate. They couldn't get enough for the amendment, and so they're stopping the people's business in Congress. That's just wrong, isn't it?
Totally wrong. Absolutely, it's childish. It's imbecile.
Why is Congress held in such low esteem?
Because they don't get anything done.
What should we do?
You're very kind. 18% approval, kick them all out. Kick them all out and get a leader. Do you think we need a leader?
Well, we have a leader. I think President Obama is a great guy. His inability to get things done is a question. I don't know why.
Inability? The guy ignores the Constitution and decides he's going to do some executive action and let everybody stay.
I'm a Republican. I'm a businessman and I'm a Republican.
What's wrong with you?
There were 2 laws proposed by Republicans and 2 laws proposed by the Democrats.
Right.
So if each person rejects the other side's proposals, then that's why nothing's getting done.
So you say in the drafting.
In the drafting process, you have to have something that both parties can get on board with. It might not be everything they want, but it's not everything they don't want.
Right.
That's how we're going to get something done in this country.
Okay.
You got to let them go because they're going to do what they're going to do anyway.
Yeah.
And the more attention we pay to them, the more they're going to do it.
Yeah, you're right. Would you say they're losers?
I would never call anyone a loser, but I would say, hey, to each their own.
They're sleeping and they're sleeping bad.
Yeah, in Congress, in Washington. Does that surprise you?
They probably wasn't doing nothing in the first place anyway, so, I mean, it's good to get rest. You know, if you ain't working, you might well go and get you some rest.
We'll be right back.